Hello, CIS C157 students. Welcome back to week 5. Wanted to record a brief video tutorial going over some of the programming concepts you'll need in order to accomplish your week 5 programming assignment. So in this tutorial, we're going to look at how to build a Python program that collects user input, stores it in a list data type, and then sorts that data using the bubble sort algorithm from your Cisco Net Academy reading this week. To demonstrate these concepts, we're going to build a tool for a teacher. So it'll be different than your specific programming assignments, but all of the concepts can easily be applied to your specific use case. This program is going to ask a teacher how many quiz scores they want to enter. It will collect those scores, sort them from lowest to highest so that the teacher can easily see which students might need help. And then it'll ask if the teacher wants to run the program again. So this is very similar to your assignment involving product prices. If you pay close attention to the structure we build here, you'll be able to apply that with no problem. So let's start by looking at a helpful hint from the assignment. The assignment suggests as an option you can wrap the main logic of your program in a while loop so the user can run the program multiple times. Let's go ahead and start by building the outer shell or the structure of our program in order to implement that. So the first thing I'll do here is just print a welcome message for the user when they run this program for the first time. So I'll do a print welcome to the quiz score sorter. And then we're going to implement our running while loop. Now we need a loop that will run indefinitely until the user indicates that they want to stop the program. And in Python, we can do that by typing out while true. So this while true will always evaluate to true. So this loop will just continue to run and run and run until we forcefully tell it to stop running. So inside of the loop, I'm going to do a couple more print statements here just so it's clear what's happening for the user as they're utilizing our program. So I'll do a print. Let's start with a new line for some spacing, and then we'll do new class batch. And then we will put our data collection and sorting logic here. So just a comment to remind myself this is where the main logic is going to go. But then I'll go down a little more, and this is the part where we're going to decide whether or not this program continues running again, or we're going to stop it from running. So let's ask the user if they want to continue. And we can create a variable here called run again, and this will be using our input to ask the user, would you like to, we can say sort another batch of scores. And then we'll tell them they can enter yes or no. Okay, now we just need to check what the user said. If they said yes, we want to do nothing basically, just let it run again. If they said no, we want to break out of this loop. So we can use the logic if run again equals no, we can print thank you for using the grade or the quiz score sorter. And then we can use this break keyword here, which tells Python if you're in a loop, just break out of it. Exit out of whatever loop you're in, and we're in this while loop structure right here. One thing we can do to improve this a little bit, because what would happen right now, what happens if the user types in no in all caps or no with the N capitalized? Right now, this if statement would not evaluate to no. Run again would not equal no, because case matters in Python, especially when we're using the single quotes like we are here. So in order to account for this and account for users maybe accidentally having their caps lock on or maybe just capitalizing no, we know that if they type in the letters N and O, kind of regardless of whether or not they're capitalized, the user's intent is probably to stop running the program. So to account for this and to make for a better user experience, we can normalize this user supplied input to make sure that it's always lowercase, even if the user types in all capitals. And to do that, we can just say if run again dot lower equals no. So we're still checking for the letters N and O, but since we're applying this dot lower, it doesn't matter if the user is using capitals or lowercase, and we'll still exit out of the program. Okay. So again, what did we do here? Well, by using while true, we created an infinite loop that'll keep running. But at the very bottom of our program, once we do all of our logic, we're asking the user if they want to continue. If they type in yes, it will continue. If they type in no, we hit the break statement and the program will terminate. The loop will end and the program will terminate because this is kind of the last piece of code right here. All right, so we have that while loop structure working. Let's go back and start working on the main logic of our program now. So let's go ahead and ask ourselves what we need to do first. Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to collect the scores from the user that we're going to be responsible for sorting. So we want to do a couple of things first. Let's go ahead and declare the list variable that's going to hold all of these scores so that we can add the scores to it as the user gives them to us. We'll start by making a variable called scores, and I'll set that to an empty list, which is just this open and close brackets right here. And then we want to ask the user how many scores they're going to provide. How many total scores do they want to enter? So we know how many times to ask them. So we can do, we'll do num scores equals, and this will be a number, an integer, so int input. How many quiz scores do you need to enter? Anything like that. Just ask the user for the total number. Now that we have the number of scores that they're going to enter, we can use a for loop to ask the user to enter their scores one by one for the number of times they indicated. So we'll say for I in range num scores, the individual score equals, we're going to do a float because scores can have decimals, and then input, I'll use an F string, enter score I plus 1. And I will explain what this I plus 1 is in a second here. For now, just trust that we are getting an individual score from the user. Now, what do we want to do with that score? Well, we want to take that individual score that they passed in and we want to add it to this list that we're going to build out every time this loop runs. And so the way we can do that is we can start with the name of the list, which for us or for me here is scores. And then if I do a period, we want to use this append method that lists in Python have. An append is just a method that will add any value to a list. So I can click on it, I'll open parentheses, and you'll see in the description here it says append an object to the end of a list, which is exactly what we want to do. Well, what do we want to append or add to our list? We want to add what they just passed in to score. So we're just going to append score, just like that. Okay, and then after this loop finishes, your assignment also asked you to print two things, the original unsorted prices for your assignment and then the prices after sorting. So for us, we're gonna print the original unsorted scores and then the scores after sorting. So let's go ahead and print the unsorted scores first here. So we'll print, I'll do a new line just for spacing, original unsorted scores, and I'll make this an F string. And then this will be scores. Okay, remember we're doing scores, the whole list, not score, which is just an individual value that only exists inside of this for loop. All right, so let's go back to this I plus 1 here. The reason that we're using I plus 1 during our prompt is that Python and most programming languages start their counting at 0. So they're 0 indexed arrays or 0 indexed counting. which means if you ask Python to count 5 times, like starting from the lowest number to 5, it will count 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, which is 5 items, but the number doesn't end at 5. Most people count, if you ask them to count to 5, they'll start at 1 and they'll count up to 5. And so in order to get our program to kind of prompt the user correctly or to count that same way, we need to increment the value of I, which starts at 0, up by 1 each time here. And in fact, I'll demonstrate what this just looks like in case it's unclear. So I'm going to just print I right now without the +1. Let's run the program. How many quiz scores do you want to enter? I'll say 3. And you'll see it's asking me enter score 0, right? Instead of enter score 1, it's saying like enter score 0. So I'll put like 80, I'll put 100, I'll put 90. And then it prints it out for us. So we can see right here, ideally I'd like this to say enter score 1, or the first score, enter score 2, enter score 3 for the 3 scores they're entering. But it looks like we're printing our list correctly in the original order. And then we do have this question, would you like to sort another batch of scores? Just to demonstrate, I'll type yes. The program will run again. Let's say I want to enter 2 scores this time. And I'll do 50 and 60, right? And then the last time, let me type no. And then we get our kind of goodbye print right here. So now we'll do I +1. We'll run this program one more time, just so you can see how it makes more sense. So how many scores do you want to enter? 3. There we go, enter score 1. So we'll do 50, 60, 40. These are low scores. Let's start going higher. So yeah, that looks exactly the way I want it to look here. And we'll type in no, we don't want to continue to exit out. Okay. So that's what the I+1 is for there. Let's go ahead and move on now. So we did our kind of gather user input here. And in fact, let me change my comment so it's more clear. So this is just getting the user input for the scores. And then I can say right here, print unsorted scores. And then down here, we can say implement bubble sort to sort the scores. Okay, so your textbook or Net Academy provides you with the code for bubble sort, and you are able to copy paste that directly out of Net Academy and use that code for your assignment. That's exactly what I'm going to do right here. I'm going to use their implementation of bubble sort. There are different implementations of bubble sort, like there are for most things in programming. You can use for loops, while loops. Their implementation uses a swapped variable and a while loop to continue to run until the list is sorted. So we're going to use the same thing for ours. So again, what I'm about to type out right here, you can find directly from your Cisco Net Academy textbook, and we'll just modify it slightly with the names of our variables so that the program works. So first, we're going to set a variable named swapped equal to true. And then just following along with the textbook, we'll do while swapped equals false. And then for I in range, len scores -1. I'll go back and explain all this. Let me just kind of type in from the textbook. Scores I is greater than scores 1. Equals true. And then scores I Yep, that should be correct there. Okay, so let's talk through what we just did here. So let's break this down. We're starting off with swapped equals true. This is just to force our program into the first iteration of this while loop. So it's a little bit of a hack that they're implementing here to start off this running while loop. Once we're inside of the loop, the first thing we do is we kind of change that value to false. right? Because our loop is going to continue to run whenever the value of swapped is true. And bubble sort, just as a reminder, the way that it works is it will iterate or walk through a list one item at a time, asking the question, is the current item greater than the item directly adjacent to it? And if it is, it will swap those values. The loop will continue to run in bubble sort until it makes it through one full iteration over the entirety of a list without performing any swaps. Once that has happened, the implication is that the list is fully sorted. And so again, the way that our program works here is we start by setting swapped to false, which is our exit case. That's our list is sorted case. And then we enter our for loop that's going to look at the current item, which is scores at index I, and then the item right next to it, which is at scores at index I plus 1. If the current score is greater than the next score, then they are out of order. So we're going to set swapped to true even before we do our swap. And then this line of code right here is just swapping the two values. In a lot of programming languages, you have to do a swap like this on multiple lines of code using a temporary variable. Python handles a lot of that behind the scenes for you. And so in Python, you're basically able to do a swap of two variables in one line here. Most programming languages, you can't do this in. But that's all we're doing. So we're saying take the current score that we're on and the one right to the right of it, and then just swap them. So it equals basically the reverse order. It equals the one adjacent to us followed by the current one we're on. Okay, so if our list is 2, 1, 3, when it does this swap, and let's say that this is I and this is I plus 1 right there. After we run our swap, our list is going to look like 1, 2, 3. Because we have taken I plus 1 and then I. So you see how we just swap those? I is 2, I plus 1 is 1. We swap those, so 1 comes first, I plus 1 comes first, and then 2, which was I, comes second. And that's exactly what we're implementing with this one line of code here. And you can see in this short example here, we sorted the list by doing that. Now in longer list, bubble sort will need to run through the entirety of the list multiple times, right? Until, again, everything is in order and this swapped value never gets changed to true. It stays false. All right, let me see if there's anything else I want to go over with this. Nope, I think that explains it. Your textbook talks about it too. I recommend working in the interactive code editor in Net Academy textbook as well to kind of mess with the variables or see what's happening if you change values. And you can do it by writing your own code like this too. But again, this is the exact algorithm that is presented to you in the textbook. Literally the only thing that I've changed is putting in the scores variable name because that's my variable name. So for your program, you're going to have a different variable name most likely. You'll just have to substitute that in. But the core logic, everything else that this is doing is the same that your textbook talked about. Okay, so we sorted it. The last thing we have to do for our program is just display the fully sorted list now. So let's go ahead and finish this. We'll come out of the while loop and we'll just do one print. And I'll do an F string again. I prefer those. So sorted scores. And we can specify here like lowest to highest. Equals scores. Same variable name there. Okay, and that should be the full implementation of our program here. So we'll run it in a second and see what it looks like. Open the terminal. Okay, new class batch. How many quiz scores do you need to enter? Let's do 3. And I'll start with maybe 85.5, then a 92, and then 78.5. And so the first thing that our program does, let me zoom in, it prints our original unsorted scores in the correct order that we entered them, and then it prints the output, right? Which should be lowest to highest, which it looks like it got correctly. So this is validation that our implementation of bubble sort was correct. And then of course we have this optional print statement to see if we want to run the program again. So I'll just say yes, we'll do this again, and maybe we'll enter 10 quiz scores. I'm just going to throw in a bunch of random numbers here. Okay, so there's our big unsorted list of just random numbers I threw in, and then this, just at glancing at it, looks to indeed be sorted here. And you'll notice I typed the number 45 twice as I was doing these randomly. It was my first and third element, and it correctly kind of placed them side by side to each other there, right? So the bubble sort algorithm does handle duplicates like that as well. And the reason it does is we're not using greater than or equal to, we're just using greater than. So 45 is not greater than 45, and so this will equate to false. It'll basically say, hey, this is sorted if two numbers that are the same are next to each other. We're sorting lowest to highest right here. If you wanted to do highest to lowest, really it's all about just changing the check that we're doing there. So instead of a greater than, it could be a less than. And so you can mess around with that implementation too to get a better understanding of how this sorting algorithm works. I recommend that you do that just for your own learning, but definitely not required for the assignment. All right, and I think that that covers everything. When you tackle your assignment with product prices, you're going to follow the same logic that we went through here. Essentially, you're just not collecting quiz scores, you're collecting prices. And so you should be able to implement your assignment very, very similarly to what I've gone over here today. Pay attention to your variable names here, especially when you're appending items to a list. Make sure that I might have named this something better, like scores list, just so I don't make a typo. So it's like one letter difference from score to scores. So you might want to consider that, because it's very easy to get confused between scores and score here and just forget an S, and then your program won't have the correct output and it'll be a little confusing on what's going on. So just a quick reminder before I let you go about submitting your assignment. Always remember, copy and paste your source code into a Word document, some type of text document, and you can submit that document or a PDF document. But this source code, all of this that you write here, has to be copy and pasted into that. Screenshots will not suffice for this portion. And then I do want a screenshot of your output. So just what you see in your terminal down here, kind of validating that your code runs successfully without errors. Keep an eye on your code as you're writing it as well. If errors come up as you're coding, don't be afraid of those errors. I recommend that you read them and try to read them closely. Python does a pretty good job at being descriptive with its errors, and usually it can guide you towards the right direction for a fix. If an error doesn't make sense to you, you can certainly copy and paste the full error into Google, and most of the times you will find a solution, because these errors are kind of very common, right? Experienced programmers make these syntax or logic errors all the time that might result in an error when you try to run the program. And so there are tons of solutions or kind of fixes for those if you Google for the specific error that you're receiving from Python. If you get stuck, remember you can always post to the weekly discussion forum. Just make sure that you're following our academic honesty guidelines, which basically means don't copy and paste all of your code here, because you will unintentionally give answers away and take away the opportunity for other students who haven't started this yet to learn. So instead, try to isolate a specific section of your code, like 3 lines here, or you can even take these 3 here, any issue that you're having problem with, and just paste that snippet or that small section of code. And that's it for me. So good luck with your coding this week. I will see you in the discussion forums. As always, if you have more questions on this, or if you're just curious and have more questions on anything, you can always reach out to me via Canvas message or email to schedule Zoom office hours. We can meet to go over this assignment or any other assignments or questions you have related to the course. All right, I hope you all have a great week, and I look forward to seeing your sorting algorithms.